Hello and welcome to episode 907 of the Our Lady of Fatima podcast. It is my pleasure to be with you this afternoon. My name is Terrence M. Stanton. We're recording on Tuesday, May 28th, 2024, in the year of our Lord Jesus Christ. Let us begin with the great saint and doctor of the church, Alphonsus Liguori's Tuesday prayer to the Blessed Virgin Mary to obtain a good death. O Mary, how shall I die? Even now that I think of my sins and of that decisive moment on which my salvation or eternal damnation depends, of that moment in which I must expire and be judged, I tremble and am confounded. O my most sweet mother, my hopes are in the blood of Jesus Christ and in thy intercession. O comfortress of the afflicted, do not then abandon me. Cease not to console me in that moment of so great affliction. If I am now so tormented by remorse for sins committed, the uncertainty of pardon, the danger of relapse, and the rigor of divine justice, what will become of me then? Unless thou helpest me, I shall be lost. Ah, my Lady, before death obtain me great sorrow for my sins, thorough amendment and fidelity to God during the remainder of my life. And when my last moment arrives, O Mary, my hope, help me in the great distress in which I shall then be. Encourage me, that I may not despair at the sight of my sins, which the devil will place before me. Obtain that I may then invoke thee more frequently, so that I may expire with thy most sweet name, and that of thy beloved Son on my lips. Nay, more, my Lady, but forgive my boldness. Before I expire, do thou come thyself and comfort me with thy presence. Thou hast granted this favor to so many of thy devout servants. I also desire and hope it. I am a sinner, it is true. I do not deserve so great a favor, but I am thy servant, love thee, and have full confidence in thee. O Mary, I shall expect thee. Do not disappoint me of this consolation. At least, if I am not worthy of so great a favor, do thou help me from heaven, that I may leave this life loving God and thee to love thee eternally in paradise. Prayer for the conversion of the Jews. O God, who dost also manifest thy omnipotence by mercy and compassion, listen to the prayers we offer up for the enlightenment of the unbelieving, perfidious Jews, that they may acknowledge the light of thy truth, which is Christ, and may be saved from their blindness. Grant, we beseech thee, all-powerful God, that the remnant of the Jewish people may walk in the way of salvation, and by following the preaching of the blessed John, thy precursor, they may safely come to him whom he foretold, Jesus Christ, thy Son, our Lord. Amen. Today, friends, we're taking a look at an article from New Liturgical Movement, available at newliturgicalmovement.org. It was published yesterday, Monday, May 27, 2024, by the great Dr. Peter Kwasniewski, the eminent Catholic philosopher and theologian. It is entitled, "The Lie That Was Told to Over 2,000 Council Fathers at Vatican II." And Dr. K begins by saying, one of the most debated questions at the Second Vatican Council was the language in which the Mass and other rites would be celebrated for Western, aka Latin Catholics, and that's the overwhelming majority of Catholics are Latin Catholics. Of course, there are different rites of the Church, Byzantine, and so forth. Dr. K continues by saying, everyone who is at the council testified that there was a battle royale over this topic. There's no one who disputes that fact. I have collected abundant testimonials in 2 articles here at NLM, and links are given. The first being the Council Fathers in support of Latin, correcting a narrative bias, and secondly, what they requested, what they expected, and what happened, Council Fathers, on the Latin Roman canon. The majority opinion was certainly against total vernacularization. When someone said that Latin was in danger of disappearing, everyone burst out laughing. In all of the drafts of Sacrosanctum Concilium, the normativity of Latin was always stressed. That's how we ended up with Sacrosanctum Concilium 36. 1. Particular law remaining in force, the use of the Latin language is to be preserved in the Latin rites. 2. But since the use of the mother tongue, whether in the Mass, the administration of the sacraments, or other parts of the liturgy, frequently may be of great advantage to the people, the limits of its employment may be extended. This will apply in the first place to the readings and directives, and to some of the prayers and chants, according to the regulations on this matter, to be laid down separately in subsequent chapters. Some council fathers were worried about the loopholes, but the relator, that is, the reporter tasked with speaking to the assembly on behalf of the committee working on the document, reassured them that total vernacularization was out of the question. Here's what the research of Father Gabriel Diaz Patri is invaluable. In his essay, Cristina Campo and the Petition of 1966, Chapter 9 in the immensely fascinating book, The Latin Mass and the Intellectuals, Petitions to Save the Ancient Mass, from 1966 to 2007, edited by Joseph Shaw and published by Aruca Press towards the end of last year, Father Diaz Patri pulls together the relevant passages buried in the gigantic tomes of the Acts of Vatican II. Father Diaz Patri writes in pages 114 to 118, the council, which in fact was still in session when Inter Ecumenici appeared in 1964, had clearly decided on the preservation of the Latin language for the liturgy of the Latin rites. Indeed, from the very beginning, the normative place of Latin in the liturgy was reiterated in number 24 of the Schema, the official draft of the Constitution, which received the approval of the Council and became Article 36, Paragraph 1 of Sacrosanctum Concilium. The expression is clear: Linguae Latina usus, in ritibus Latinus servetur. The use of the Latin language and the Latin rites must be preserved. The subjunctive servetur clearly expresses a command and not a mere recommendation. The Acta Synodalia Sacrosancti Concilii Ecumenici Vaticani Secundi, where the minutes of all the discussions that took place in the conciliar hall are officially transcribed, records that some of the council fathers suggested changes in the wording to weaken the principle, but their proposals were defeated. The clarity of the principle is confirmed both by the later commentary of Father Carlo Braga and by the official reporter, Bishop Jesus Enciso Viana of Majorca, whose task was to clarify to the council fathers the meaning of the text, who stated in a later debate, to completely exclude the Latin language from the Mass would contradict the principle already established by the Council in Article 36. Nevertheless, the Constitution then goes on to state that since it is not unusual for the use of the vernacular language to be very useful to the people, it may be given an appropriate place. There are important nuances in this text that are worth considering with the help of the Acta Synodalia. The initial schema stated categorically, ampliar locus ipsi in liturgia tribuator, a wider place must be given, number 24, paragraph 2, to the vernacular. But contrary to what happened in the previous case, this time the council decided to correct the subjunctive of the expression that had originally been proposed by the drafters, replacing it with the more moderate form, ampliar locus ipsi tribui valeat, a wider place may be given, which was approved by the council fathers as paragraph 2 of Article 36 of the Conciliar Constitution. A little further on, in a parallel text, the same procedure was followed with the subjunctive of the expression congruus locus tribuator. A congruent place must be given to the vernacular languages, proposed in that case by the drafters of the schema, which was changed by the council to the weaker congruus locus tribui possit. It may be given an appropriate place, as we find in paragraph 54 of the document officially approved by the council fathers. The incorporation of these modifications into the original schema was explained in the following way by the reporter in the conciliar hall so that the meaning of the points upon which they had to vote would be clear to participants. We have wished to express it in such a way that those who wish to celebrate the whole Mass in the Latin language do not impose their opinion on the others, but that in the same way those who wish to use the vernacular in some parts of the Mass do not oblige the former to do so. Therefore, according to what had already been established in number 36, we have granted a suitable place for the vernacular languages, but we do not say must be given, but may be given, which we had already taken care to do in the aforementioned number 36. On the other hand, The above-mentioned term congruous, used in number 54, is not accidental either. If the Conference of Bishops decide to permit the use of the vernacular, the place and mode of application were to be clearly delimited. First, it is clear that the vernacular was to be used only in masses with the people, in missis cum populo celebratis, and secondly, the use of the vernacular language was to be limited to certain parts of the celebration, and these parts should be specifically enumerated in each case. These parts could be in principle, in primis, the readings and admonitions, in lectionibus admonitionibus, the common prayer or prayer of the faithful, which had just been reincorporated into the Roman Mass, as well as some prayers and chants, in nonnulus orationibus et cantibus. In addition, when local conditions made it advisable, pro concedii locorum, this could also be extended to those parts of the Mass that pertain to the people, etiam in partibus quae ad populum spectant. However, the enumeration of various possibilities in no way implied a universal authorization whose application could be decided individually by the celebrant, but it was up to the competent territorial authority, and, if applicable, after having heard the opinion of the bishops of neighboring regions speaking the same language, to establish, first of all, whether the vernacular language would be allowed or not, and if it was allowed, to what degree, after approval and confirmation by the Apostolic See. On the other hand, the enumeration of the various possibilities for the use of the vernacular in the instruction does not mean that all must be authorized. Rather, it represents the limits within which the competent authority may authorize. Father Braga also explains that if we follow the conciliar constitution, the parts that are sung or said by the celebrant should be only in Latin. However, the same constitution adds that if in some place, secubi, after careful and prudent consideration, sedulo et prudentur, it seems opportune to allow an even wider use of the vernacular to include also some of the parts, aliaquae ex his partibus, said by the priest. An indult should be requested from the Holy See according to the norms given in number 40. However, prayers recited in secret by the priest are always excluded, semper excludentur. These must be only in Latin. When the language issue was discussed again in the Congratio Generalis 43, the reporter explained the proposed text. We are therefore leaving open two doors. The door is not closed to anyone who wishes to celebrate the whole Mass in the Latin language, and the door is not closed to anyone to use the vernacular language in specific parts of the Mass. In this way, the only door that was completely closed by the Council, according to the text approved, and in light of this explanation given by the reporter, is that of being able to say the whole Mass in the vernacular. On the other hand, as the reporter points out, the only thing that is commanded in this article is to be found in a text added to the original schema by the Council Fathers, namely, that the faithful should be taught to say or sing in Latin the parts of the Mass that correspond to them. Let us summarize in 5 points what Sacro Sanctum Concilium teaches according to the official relator. Number 1, Latin must be kept in the liturgy. This is not optional. 2, a liturgy in Latin only will always be possible. 3, the vernacular may be used at the discretion of episcopal conferences and with the Holy See's approval. Number 4, but the vernacular is to be used for only some portions of the liturgy, not for all. And number 5, the people must be instructed in Latin Gregorian chant. Thus, at a busy urban parish in England or the USA, one might envision a Sunday schedule something like this. Not that I'm recommending it, but merely envisioning what might follow from the foregoing norms. 2 low masses in Latin, one of them a dialogue mass. 1 low mass with the changing parts in the vernacular. A high mass chanted in Latin by the choir, trained on ward method. A high mass in Latin with English hymns and readings. That, I suggest, is the mental picture that most closely resembles what all the bishops and superiors of the Catholic Church voted in favor of. As Father Diaz Patri shows, the Council Fathers were solemnly assured prior to voting on the text that its meaning could not be construed as endorsing or even allowing total vernacularization, and that the rights of Latin would be respected to such an extent that some part of the Mass would always remain in Latin, and the whole of it could remain in Latin for those who wished it. And Paul VI promulgated this document as thus presented. In the meetings of the Central Preparatory Commission prior to the Council, Cardinal Montini gave a speech in which, after appealing to the other members of the CPC to broaden the use of the vernacular for certain parts of Mass, he then stated, "In the rest of the Mass, the Latin language will be kept, except perhaps for the Lord's Prayer, Our Father, which is, as it were, the summit of public prayer and is the best preparation of souls for communion." At the council itself, Cardinal Montini stated even more clearly, especially when it comes to the language to be used in worship, the use of the ancient language handed down by our forefathers, namely the Latin language, should for the Latin Church be firm and stable in those parts of the rite which are sacramental and properly and truly priestly. All the while, the main advocates of liturgical reform and their leader, Cardinal Montini, with his new friend Annibale Bugnini, whom he quickly sized up as the right man for the job, as Yves Caron narrates in his biographies of both figures, had no intention of honoring this stipulation. Monsignor Bugnini was an enemy of Latin liturgy all his life. Famously, in a 1969 response to Hubert Gédan, who had lamented the damage to church unity from the almost total disappearance of Latin, Bugnini showed his cards. "Do you believe there is a deep and heartfelt unity amid lack of understanding, ignorance, and the dark night of a worship that lacks a face and light, at least for those out in the nave?" It would appear that many who worked with Bugnini to draft Sacrosanctum Concilium and later staffed the concilium felt the same way. Yet they knew they could not ask for too much too fast. This is why Bugnini said, in what is among his most notorious utterance, speaking to a small number of fellow SC drafters on November 11, 1961, "It would be most inconvenient for the articles of our Constitution to be rejected by the Central Commission or by the Council itself. That is why we must tread carefully and discreetly. Carefully, so that proposals be made in an acceptable manner, modo acceptabile. Or, in my opinion, formulated in such a way that much is said without seeming to say anything. Let many things be said in embryo, in nuce. And in this way, let the door remain open to legitimate and possible post-conciliar deductions and applications. Let nothing be said that suggests excessive novelty and might invalidate all the rest. Even what is straightforward and harmless, ingenua et innocentia, we must proceed discreetly. Not everything is to be asked or demanded from the council, but the essentials, the fundamental principles are." Dr. K continues, part of what he already had in mind here was total vernacularization, which he knew would have been massively voted down by the Council Fathers. So we mustn't tell them that. We must utter some fundamental principles, and if needed, grease the wheels with a few untruths. It wouldn't be the first time that one had to tell a noble lie for the good of the people. After the council, the moves toward this goal were rapid. As Father Diaz Patri well documents in the aforementioned book, there was Inter Ecumenici of 1964, the first Italian Mass by none other than Paul VI in March of 1965, the Missa Normativa of 1967, the infamous Papal General Audiences of 1965, March 17, and 1969, November 19 and November 26, in which Paul VI bare farewell to Latin and Gregorian chant. If we step back and view this whole elaborate picture, what do we see? Quite simply this: Montini and Bugnini and all who belonged in their camp wanted to move away from Latin into the vernacular long before the council, but they made sure to present to the council a document sufficiently conservative and sufficiently vague to allow over 2,000 bishops to sign off on it. And what is more, made sure everyone was given the false assurance that Latin would remain in place, even though their actions immediately after the council made it abundantly clear they never had any intention of honoring these reassurances. Within a few short years, Latin was nearly entirely gone from the church's public worship, or rather, it had been actively excluded, banished. How then can one attempt to justify this gigantic bait and switch? Well, predictably, it is turned into pious hagiography, an unexpected victory of divine providence over minds as yet insufficiently enlightened at the council. In the words of Cavadini, Healy, and Wanandi, quote, "As we have seen, the council fathers desired that the Latin language be preserved, especially in the people's responses, although they readily acknowledged that the vernacular was frequently advantageous to the people. What they did not anticipate was the enthusiasm with which the vernacular was accepted by clergy and laity alike. Bishops' conferences around the world voted to expand the use of the vernacular and requested and received permission to do so from Rome. The Vox Populi had spoken and had been affirmed by the Church. Vernacular it would be. This ecclesial affirmation undercuts some of the most common arguments against the Novus Ordo, that the wholesale adoption of the vernacular and the Reformed liturgy more broadly is illegitimate because it went beyond what the council intended. What this fails to note is that Church's magisterium in the persons of Paul VI and John Paul II confirmed these developments, judging them to be authentic liturgical developments that were in accord with the aims of the council, even if the council had not explicitly called for them," end quote. Given all that we have seen, this interpretation is the very height of tendentiousness. Such an approach, where the Vox Populi plus the papal rubber stamp equals legitimate development, is really no different from the move of progressives who say that the spirit outstripped the limited mental faculties and theological categories of the Council Fathers, and paved the way for outcomes that far exceeded their wildest dreams, or nightmares as the case may be. In both cases, the past is left behind, buried beneath the rubble of its own deconstruction, and replaced with a new Catholicism that must sound different, look different, be different than it was for every prior century of its existence. One cannot learn about a bait and switch of this magnitude without souring on the council as event, the governance of Paul VI, the ideology of Bugnini, and the good faith of the entire concilium. There is no room for a naively optimistic narrative. There was deviancy, plotting, mendacity, and betrayal. That is the milieu out of which the liturgical reform arose. As children bear the traits of their parents, so the reform bears the traits of its treacherous origins and carries them forward with daily ruptures, like a garment torn inch by inch. That is why I say in my books that the difficulties in the reform are not cosmetic, but genetic. They have to do with the principles of its construction, design, and execution, not the superficially mutable aspects of its instantiation here or there. And this is why restoration, not reform, is the only path to a satisfactory and stable liturgical future for the Catholic Church. So ends the article, and if you'd like to check out the endnotes, head on over to newliturgicalmovement.org. Many thanks to Dr. Peter Kwasniewski for that article. So what was promised, what was sold to the bishops at Vatican II, friends, isn't what happened. Latin was supposed to be preserved. The traditional Latin Mass was supposed to be preserved, and now it is flatly under attack by the present pontificate and has been for the last several years. So I would highly advise you to continue to hold fast to tradition and to attend the traditional Latin Mass. You will not regret it. I guarantee it to you. All right, friends, let's take a look at the First Saturday Challenge. We are coming up here in a few days on the first Saturday of the month. Help us present Our Lady with a spiritual bouquet of 100,000 First Saturdays by the 100th anniversary of her request of this devotion, December 10, 2025. To join the challenge, please visit www.fatima.org/100 by 100. As a reminder, the 5 elements of the First Saturday devotion: number 1, make a good confession within 8 days before or after the first Saturday. Number 2, receive Holy Communion. Number 3, pray 5 decades of the Holy Rosary. Number 4, keep Our Lady company for 15 additional minutes while meditating on the mysteries of the Rosary. And number 5, offer each of the above acts in reparation for the blasphemies and offenses committed against the Immaculate Heart of Mary. I'd also like to say a word about helping autism through learning and outreach, available on the web at halo-soma.org. That's HALO-SOMA.org. Additionally, please tune in to episodes 277 and 548 of the Our Lady of Fatima podcast for more information pertaining to RPM. That is an acronym for Rapid Prompting Method, a system of communication for non-speakers. Before my niece was about 8 years old, we didn't even know her favorite color. Now, thanks to God's grace, her hard work, and the hard work of her family breaking through to open communication via RPM, we know that she's a comprehensive genius who can compose music, poetry, very skilled in regards to mathematics. She even knows foreign languages. RPM has been as big of a breakthrough in terms of non-speakers for their being able to communicate as sign language was for the deaf. You can also point to Braille in terms of being able to read for the blind, but you can't use a tool unless you know about it. That's where you come in, and thank you so much for helping us. Please say an Ave Maria for yours truly, and I will talk to you again very soon. Goodbye, and God love you.